Thank you, President. My question, with our notice, is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. Noting that a recent Department of Defence media release stated that more than 70 Australian companies have directly shared more than $4.13 billion in global F-35 production and sustainment contracts, and that earlier this month it was revealed that Israel has been ordering F-35 spare parts from global suppliers for the F-35s it is using in the bombardment of Gaza, can the Minister confirm whether or not Australia is or will be supplying F-35 parts to the State of Israel?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Wong.
Thank you. I would first say, given some of the events this week, I would encourage all in here not to continue to promulgate some of the disinformation on social media. There's been a lot of disinformation on social media about what Australia is doing. I'm advised that Australia has not supplied weapons to Israel since the Hamas-Israel conflict began, and I'm advised that that is the case for at least the last 5 years. I would also make the point, and I trust that the senators down that end might actually do their part to push back on this disinformation, that the Australian government has not had any involvement in the conduct of the military conflict in Gaza. And given some of the misinformation on social media and the distress and anger and, frankly, some of the violent behaviour that we have seen, I would trust that those in the positions of authority might exercise. I'm not surprised you take a point of order at that.
Minister Wong. Sorry, Senator Shoebridge.
My point of order is about relevance. The question was about whether or not Australia is or will be supplying F-35 parts to the State of Israel. The Minister's response is not relevant.
The Minister is being relevant. Thank you, Senator Shoebridge.
That when he is asked to consider his responsibilities to the chamber, he takes a point of order and he's doing it again.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Shoebridge.
The minister is now A, making a personal reflection, and B, clearly being not relevant to the question, which is or will Australia be supplying F-35 parts to the State of Israel?
I will draw the minister back to the question, and the minister was not making a personal reflection. Minister.
Well, if we want to talk about personal reflections, we might want to go back to yesterday. But I'm happy
Minister,
to respond.
please resume your seat.
I'm happy to respond.
Minister, I have Senator Shoebridge on his feet. Senator Shoebridge.
The minister flouted your ruling and sought to actually again not be relevant and reduce to mudslinging.
Senator Shoebridge, resume your seat. The minister had just. Senator Watt, I am responding. The minister had just stood again and begun her response. Minister, please continue.
Just waiting for you to stand before I speak, because I'm just waiting for you to stand before I speak, because you just like to do that.
Minister Wong, I am going to draw you back to the question.
Come on. I have indicated that what I've responded to your question, I think, in the first 20 seconds, that the advice I have from Defence is that Australia has not supplied weapons to Israel since the conflict began. And I again reiterate, there's a lot of disinformation on social media, and I would invite Senator Shoebridge and his leader to perhaps make sure they don't promulgate it as well.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Shoebridge, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Given the criticism of Oxfam America and Amnesty International that the provision of 155mm artillery shells to the State of Israel for use in Gaza undermine the protection of civilians and respect for international humanitarian law, what, if any, guarantees can you give that Australian 155mm artillery shells produced by Neoa Munitions at Maryborough will not be directly exported to the State of Israel in the future or indirectly sent for use in Gaza through the US under the approved community export arrangements with the US?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister.
I think, to be clear about the question, I have responded on the advice I have, which is that Australia has not supplied weapons to Israel.
Order.
since the Hamas-Israel conflict began and for at least the last 5 years. I think I understand from the question that I'm asked to rule out something that may or may not happen in the future. Right, well, that's not an appropriate question for question time. I can tell you what our response is, I can tell you what the advice is, but you are trying. No, you know what it is? You are trying to make this a political issue in here, and I am saying to you it is utterly irresponsible, given what is happening out there in the community, for you to be backing in some of the misinformation and disinformation on social media. It is irresponsible. This party, your party, should take some control of what you are doing.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Shoebridge, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, what response do you have to the criticism published today by the Australian Institute of International Affairs that the lack of transparency around Australia's military exports leaves the government exposed to criticisms that Australia exported weapons could be used in conflicts like Gaza, and that without change it risks Australia's credibility as a sponsor of the rules-based international order?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Wong.
As the senator would be aware, we have initiated a review of the Defence Trade Controls Act 2012 to ensure it remains effective, efficient and fit for purpose. I think the senator has been advised of that previously. In relation to the point about the international rules-based order, that is an important point. That goes to who we are. And you might recall, Senator, the motion you voted against in this chamber, the bipartisan motion on this conflict that you voted against, talked about...
Senator Shoebridge. Senator Shoebridge. Minister,
the motion that your party voted against in this chamber... Well,
Order.
The motion that your party voted against in this chamber reference specifically international humanitarian law, because that is an important national interest for Australia, and it is disappointed that you voted against it.
Senator Marielle Smith.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Wong. Can the Minister update the Senate on the progress being made by the Albanese government to deliver Australia's conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines and realise the benefits of the AUKUS partnership?
Minister Wong.
Thank you to Senator Smith from the great state of South Australia for her question about defence and defence industry jobs. And I'm pleased to say, in response to her question, that the government is making considerable progress. The Prime Minister was invited by President Biden for a state visit last month, and that visit was followed shortly by the Deputy Prime Minister, where both had successful engagements to drive our AUKUS partnership forward. Since announcing the pathway to acquire nuclear-powered submarines, the Albanese government has taken tangible actions to implement the AUKUS partnership, including the investment of $150 million in skills and workforce development in the May budget, establishing the Australian Submarine Agency on the 1st of July and commencing initial works on the submarine construction yard in our home state of South Australia, meaning mine and Senator Smith's, not everybody's. Last week in Adelaide, the Deputy Prime Minister announced further decisive steps with Premier Malinauskas. The South Australian Defence Industry Workforce and Skills Report was released, which helps identify how we can best develop the defence industry workforce in South Australia. The land exchange between the Commonwealth and South Australian governments was finalised, and the government has released an exposure draft of enabling legislation critical for establishing a seamless industrial base with our AUKUS partners. At the heart of this legislation are game-changing reforms for Australian defence industry, which should see the removal of burdensome red tape with the United Kingdom and the United States. As Deputy Prime Minister Miles has made clear, establishing a shared industrial base between Australia, the United States and the United Kingdom is a core part of AUKUS. This is the greatest industrial endeavour Australia has embarked on for decades, and it will see jobs and economic investment for generations to come.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
I note the Minister for Defence was in South Australia last week, where he visited the Osborne Naval Shipyard with Premier Pete Malinauskas. Can the minister tell the Senate how South Australia, and in particular defence industry, will benefit from the recent announcements made between the Albanese government and the South Australian government?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Smith for her supplementary question. It gives me the opportunity to speak in a little more detail about the South Australian Defence Industry Workforce Skills Report and Action Plan that was released on Friday. That plan highlights that the defence industry in South Australia is forecast to grow from its current level of around 3,500 direct jobs to more than 8,500 direct jobs in the 2040s. Of course, what we need to do is act now to ensure we're able to recruit enough people with the right skills in 5 years and 10 years and beyond, and that is what the government is doing. The action plan details a strategy to grow and sustain South Australia's defence industry workforce, the workforce that is required to deliver the largest and most complex defence project Australia has undertaken. It reaffirms the government's commitment to ensuring a continuous naval shipbuilding capability. The Deputy Prime Minister also announced the formal arrangement for land transfers between the Commonwealth and Australia to enable the development of the construction yard and the Skills and Training Academy.
Senator Marielle Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. What are some of the challenges the Albanese government has confronted in delivering these important defence industry projects?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
Thank you. I might just, if I may, just finish the last point I was making in relation to the previous question, which is the development of the submarine construction yard and the Skills and Training Academy at Osborne, which also will enable 4,000 jobs expected in construction work over the years to come. But of course, there was a very different approach that was taken when those opposite were in government. We saw the legacy, a decade of chaos and dysfunction. Defence had, in fact, as the now Shadow Minister of Defence has stated, Defence had too many ministers over a 9-year period, which of course led to a squandering of a lot of opportunity. And of course, the approach of the former government was to promise the world, then walk away from it. We saw the in and out deal with Japan, then an in and out of a deal with France, and then who can forget Senator Johnston, who said he wouldn't trust the Australian Submarine Corporation to build a canoe.
Thank you, Minister.
Wouldn't
the time
trust
for
them to build a
answering
canoe.
has expired.